Hi guys, I'm Sarah with Rusty Dog & Co. and welcome back to another video in this kitchen remodel series. Now in the last video, we took care of finishing off the ceiling for this kitchen. Now we had an old plaster ceiling that was in really rough shape and we covered that up, added some structural strapping pieces and added a tongue and groove ceiling on top of that. We put in some recessed lights. It is feeling so much brighter in here, and this ceiling, in my opinion, it looks awesome. It added so much character to this space already, so I'm excited to see some of these other things come together. That means that this week we are tackling the flooring. Now, if you can remember back to the demo video, I think it was, I kind of explained to you what was happening with this flooring. Now we had like an 1.75 inch slope to the middle of the room here. And what was going on was we had a joist that was sagging. It had been jacked up previously in the past, but over like 30 or 40 years, the ground had just settled, causing that joist to come off of that jack. So we had somebody come out, go under the house, and they jacked that back up again, and that lifted the floor up quite a bit. We're still a little bit off. This is a really old house, so it was gonna be hard to get it perfect, but we were sitting much better than we were, and so I feel a little bit better about putting the flooring in here than before. So my plan is to install some luxury vinyl planks in here on top of this subfloor. Now this subfloor was actually in pretty good shape. There was one section that we had to replace, but the rest of it was really solid, so we're gonna leave that in place. However, we're not exactly 100% level, so in order for this LVP flooring to really work the best, I want to try to get it as level as I can in the areas that are going to be really heavily trafficked. Now I'm not going to worry about trying to get it level under the cabinets because I'll just shim that up. I'll shim all the cabinets up where they need to be, and then I'll put a little piece of trim in front of it so you won't see any of that gaps. Because this is an old floor and we know we have some sagging issues already, I also don't want to add just like self-leveler compound all over this flooring just to try to get it flat and even all around, because that would just be adding more weight to this flooring when we know we already have some sagging issues. So what I want to do is I want to just take some measurements. I want to figure out the layout of my space here. I want to find the areas that are going to be walked on the most, and I want to see if I've got any low spots. If I do, I want to mark those, and then my plan is to come in with some self-leveler just in those areas to see if I can just get those areas a little bit more flat and leveled. Now, if we were using something like hardwoods or anything that we could kind of nail or screw down, this wouldn't be as big of an issue dealing with a little bit of slope here, but because this LVP flooring is a floating floor system, that means that it's not attached to anything. So I'm a little bit worried that in the areas where there's some dips in the floor, if you were to happen to step in those areas, it might just over time wear that flooring down, might cause the flooring to snap or break, or it could cause some sort of squeaking or noises. So that is why I want to take the time to try to just add a little bit of this leveling compound to see if we can get those areas a little bit more flat and level. So first thing I gotta do is I gotta clean this entire space up. I gotta get everything out of here. I want to take a measurement, see where my cabinets are going to fall, and then I will take my level and see kind of like how off we are in certain areas and see how much we need to come up in those areas. All right, let me get to cleaning. Well guys, I have good news. I feel like that's not been the trend for this remodel. Usually it's something going differently than I had planned for. But in this case, I have good news. And that is that I don't think I'm gonna need any self-leveler here, which just saves me like an entire step, an entire day, actually several days, because I was gonna have to pour that. It was probably gonna have to cure for a couple of days, which would just set me back time-wise. This is the section here where the flooring would be. Yes, it's much higher up on the ends where the cabinets were gonna be. That is where it's way higher than here, but where the cabinets are going, I will just shim the cabinets up. It was sagging a little bit here in the middle, but since we had that jacked up, that took a lot of that sag out of the middle. Now I want to put my level here. This is like a 6-foot level. It pretty much covers the entire span of where the flooring would go. And I don't know how well you can see, but there is very little gap now in this section. I went ahead and just put a couple of pieces together too. I wanted to just see if you put it on here, if there was like any sort of flex. in the seams or anywhere where there was like lower areas, but it's feeling really solid. And one of the things that I think is helping with that is that these are the like extra large size planks. This was the only size that they had in this particular color. So I got these, and I think that's actually going to help me out a little bit because they are so big. They are solid. They are good and sturdy. They have very little flex to them. And I think that is going to help me out on this floor. That's not 100% level, but it is close enough. I think that you're not gonna really feel any of that flex in the boards. If there are any kind of like sort of low spots, I truly just don't think it needs self-leveler. Could you put it on here if you wanted to get this whole kitchen entirely level? You could do that. But like I said, because this is such an old house, we know we have some sagging issues. I don't want to add a bunch of that self-leveler and then just create a bigger problem. Adding more weight to this floor just would settle a little bit quicker. So I'm going to forego the self-leveler because I don't necessarily think it is needed. All of my joints are still flush. I'm not having any areas that are kind of sitting up higher than others. And so that was something that I was worried about too. I've taken a couple of these planks and I've kind of placed them in different areas in the floor, some of the spots that I thought might be an issue, and it seems to be totally fine. That means that I need to get all of my toe boxes sort of here, and I'll have to do this tomorrow. I was planning on taking this entire day to do all the self-levelers, so I'm gonna have to come back tomorrow, and my plan is to get all of my toe boxes installed, get those level. That'll tell me where my flooring needs to go. That way I can space that all out accordingly. You need to leave it like a 1/4 inch gap all around everything. I'm not gonna be running this flooring underneath the cabinets, so I need to get all of that installed, and that's planned for tomorrow. But overall, good news. All right guys, I'm back in the kitchen today, and the goal for today is to get all of the flooring installed in this kitchen space. That's a pretty lofty goal, but this is not my first time installing LVP, so I feel like I have a pretty good system in place. However, every space is a little bit different, so you never know what you might run into or what challenges you might face, but we're gonna hope that we can get this knocked out today. Now, the flooring that I'm using here is this life-proof flooring, and this is actually the extra large size. These are pretty large size planks here, and I think that's going to be nice because these are nice and solid. They have very little flex, and it's just going to allow me to use fewer pieces along this floor, so hopefully we can get it knocked out quicker. And I like the larger size format of these. Let's see what they claim here on our box. Okay, antimicrobial protection, wet and steam mop approved, resist extreme temperatures, waterproof. That's a pretty big one. I was looking to see if it said scratch proof as well. I'm not seeing anywhere that it is scratch proof, but this stuff is pretty durable. You're not gonna make too many scratches on it from just like normal things. Maybe something really heavy could put a scratch in there, but you do get a lot of protection with this style of flooring. Now these pieces actually have the underlayment on the back side here, so I don't have to install any sort of underlayment underneath these planks. And actually, if you were to install any sort of underlayment, I think it actually voids your warranty, so you don't want to do that. This has a lifetime warranty on it for residential spaces, so in a house like this, if you were to ever get a piece that got water damage for whatever reason, even though it claims it's waterproof, or maybe you got a crack or anything like that, you could submit a claim for that warranty and they would replace it. So that is a pretty nice perk of this life-proof flooring. Now, the rest of the house has some really like old hardwood floors, and so I didn't want to go with any sort of wood look, so we went with a tile look for in this kitchen space, which I think is just going to look a little bit better rather than trying to match that hardwood. This is the color Glen Bar Concrete, I think. I got it on homedepot.com. I ordered a couple boxes of this stuff. You want to make sure when you're ordering this stuff, you always order quite a bit more than you need. A lot of the times I've done this flooring and a lot of the tongues or little areas here on the side are broken, so that's a piece that you can't use. So you want to make sure that you get plenty, that way you have plenty of extras in case you run into a situation like that. Another important thing to figure out when you're starting this flooring is you want to kind of take some measurements of your space and figure out how you want your layout to be, because you don't want to end up with like a tiny little sliver in a section. That's just not going to look very good. So you want to kind of figure out if you need to cut your pieces on the ends to make sure that you're not left with a tiny little piece. So I in particular want to focus right now on two particular areas, one being where the gas range will be, and then the other where the refrigerator will be. I want to go ahead and start there because my hope is that I can get the pieces in there, and then I can go ahead and move those appliances back into this kitchen space before I put the rest of the flooring down. I'm a little bit worried if I was to go ahead and put all the flooring down and then try to move those appliances in here, there would just be risk of this getting scratched up or maybe breaking or anything like that. Those appliances are really heavy, so I don't even want to risk it. So I'm just going to go ahead and start in these areas where those appliances will be. Then I'll get those appliances in here, and then I will get the rest of the flooring laid down. I think that's everything that I have to say about flooring. Let me just get started on this, and hopefully, like I said, we'll be able to knock this all out today. Now, this is a floating floor system, so that means that I need to take some shims, and I don't want to butt it all the way up against where my cabinets are going to be. I need to leave about a 1/4 inch gap everywhere that it's kind of going to butt up against the cabinets. That's going to allow for seasonal expansion and contraction. That way this floor can kind of all move together. Now, one thing that I find kind of funny is they tell you not to install this under cabinets because the weight of the cabinets would basically allow this to not move. However, they do tell you to install it under appliances like ranges or refrigerators. But I've installed this flooring before, and I always find that those areas where the fridges are sitting or the range, they do kind of separate at the joints. That's just been my experience. The weight of those appliances kind of keeps the floor from moving in those areas. So eventually over time, that joint closest to those appliances will separate as well. I've kind of looked it up to see kind of if this is something you're supposed to do, if you're supposed to run the flooring under these appliances, and everything I can read at least says you're supposed to because those items can be moved. But just know that if you run the flooring under these appliances, you might get some separation at times from that first joint near those appliances, just because this floor is trying to float, it's trying to expand and contract seasonally, and the weight of those appliances is just kind of holding that one section of flooring down. It's really not that big of an issue, but it's just something to be aware of. That it might not be a perfect joint in those areas. Just in my experience, I have had some separation there. So I'm gonna have to cut this piece here so that it can slide under here a little bit more, because I'm gonna need at least one section that's a little bit less wide than the size of these planks. I don't wanna have it on the other side of the room because it's going to be a longer run, so I'd like to leave that all full-size planks. This is just a small section here, so I think it will look better if I kind of hide that smaller section over here. One thing about cutting this vinyl though, they always say you can cut it with a knife. I've tried to do that. It is never easy. So I just end up cutting it with my table saw, jigsaw, miter saw, but it makes such a mess. At the end of the day, I'm gonna just be coated in this vinyl plasticky dust. I already feel like I have it up my nose. I need to put a mask on when I'm cutting. Anyways, well, let's get going.
To install an LVP floor, then I would definitely recommend picking up a floor install kit. It will usually come with all the spacers you need, a soft mallet hammer for hammering in the joints, and this little tool that helps you hammer the hard to reach sections up against walls and cabinets. That I had the flooring in place under the range, we could go ahead and get that back in place and hooked up so they could have somewhat of a functional kitchen again.
All right guys, so I've got the gas range in place now. Now I don't have to worry about scratching up any of the floor, and I can kind of just work from there. Now it looks a little bit different in here because I wanted to go ahead and bring a couple of the cabinets in so I can know exactly where I need to take this flooring to for this like little peninsula jut out here. I don't have these in place right now. I'm just using them as a guide for my flooring. Once I get the flooring in, I'll probably take them out and then get them reinstalled at another time. I'm pretty sure I haven't done any sort of cabinet building video yet in this series. It's kind of hard to figure out what order I wanted to release these videos in, but I have gone ahead and made all of the cabinets. So you'll see how I put together all of these cabinets a little bit later on. All right, now that I got this section sort of taken care of, I'm gonna kind of just work out from here until I get to the end of my little peninsula area, and then I'll probably do a long run the entire length of the floor. All right, let's grind.
Now for this flooring, you want to make sure you randomize your seams so you don't end up with one long line of joints. Also, if you happen to be using some LVP flooring that has a pattern, you just want to try to randomize that pattern and not use too many pieces that look similar close to one another. This style was pretty easy when it came to that because it didn't have too much of a distinguishing pattern. Now I'm ready to go ahead and get the new fridge slid into place. Just have to shimmy it through this door. Sheesh, that was a tight fit, but we got it. If you think that was hard, you should have seen us trying to get it through the front door. The thing about old houses is that they didn't make the door openings wide enough to accommodate modern day appliances, which is kind of rude, right? So in order to get this new fridge into the house, my father-in-law and I had to completely remove the doors on the fridge and the front door to the house to get this thing inside. It was a struggle, but we got it in eventually, and now it's made its way into its new home in the kitchen. With the fridge in place, I continued installing the flooring, and this is where things sort of started to go south for me.
Yeah, the problem was where there's a bit more of a dip here. When I put the boards in, this one is sitting up higher and it won't lock in with the other one. And every time I try it ends up breaking the tongue off. I got this stuff I'm gonna try to fill some low spots.
You're great, girl.
Thanks.
I realized at this point that my analysis about not needing self-leveler earlier was incorrect. This section of the floor has a bit of a dip, but I knew that before I started. During my initial prep, I had laid a couple of pieces together in this area to see how this dip would affect things, and it seemed fine. The joints were still lining up okay, but what I forgot to think about is that once the entire floor was connected, it was going to be much harder for those individual pieces to bend and accommodate any dips in the floor, because they're essentially all locked into the other pieces, and the weight of it all will kind of prevent it from moving much. I found this to be the case, especially in this spot where there was a dip in the floor. The joints, they would just not go together well, no matter how much I tried. Since it was too late to pour the self-leveler, I applied a thick layer of this floor patch stuff to see if I could fill in that dip a little. I just made sure to feather this stuff out as much as I could. Once I had one layer down on the floor, I left it to dry overnight.
Well, I guess it's pretty obvious that I did not, in fact, finish this flooring in one day. I had really ambitious hopes that I was gonna get this all knocked out, but I started running into an issue here. After working with these extra large size tiles, there's a couple things I like about them, and then there's a few things that are kind of annoying. One of the things I like about it is that I kind of like the larger size look. There's less joints, and I think that looks a little bit better. They take a lot less of these to go down because they are bigger, so you're not having to place and hammer in as many pieces. But with that, because they are so big, because they're rigid, they're heavy, I do find that when you put one down and you're trying to hammer it in, it doesn't want to hammer in as easily because of the weight of it, because of the size of it. So what was happening is when I was trying to hammer it into that joint, because it wasn't going in very easily here, because you got to put a good amount of force on there to get it to move, it was breaking those tongues off. Once those tongues break, it looks kind of bad. I've got one section over here that they broke, but because of the fridge is on it now, I don't want to have to take this all off and redo it. So I think I'm just going to find another way to kind of fix that. So what I did yesterday is I took some of this like self-leveling floor patch stuff and I tried to fill it up. Now I think you could only do this in layers. They only recommend to do this in like an 1/8 inch layers, so I couldn't do a ton of it at a time. It took several hours to dry. It is nice and dry now. I could keep building up, but I want to see if that kind of helped any. I don't even know if this is going to help at all, but I just kind of want to see if it doesn't help and I'm still having issues. I might have to add another coat and just keep building up those coats until I can get this low spot filled in. I think that's what's causing the issue, but honestly, I don't know. I don't want to keep just trying different pieces and hammering it, breaking those tongues off, because I've only got a couple boxes of this flooring left and we still got a bit of a section over here we got to get through. Hopefully we are coming at this with, I won't say a fresh body, because the old body's hurting a little bit today after being on my knees all day yesterday doing this flooring, but hopefully we're going to be able to get this flooring totally knocked out today. Wish me luck. All right, I think that fixed the issue. I'm not having this piece sit higher. That is a much better joint than it was. So I think even just this one coat raised it up enough to where it was sitting a little bit more flat. I'm happy with that. Again, this is a really old house, an old floor. There's gonna be some low spots. If you wanted to get this perfect, you could come in and level out this whole floor, but that was not the option I was wanting to go with. So we're gonna make this work.
This flooring install was a bit of a roller coaster for me in terms of trying to decide whether or not to use self-leveler. Initially, I planned to. I even bought all the materials and hauled it there to mix up and apply, but then I got in my head and thought maybe it wasn't necessary, so I returned the materials. I think I kind of struggle with this decision in particular because a large part of me suffers from the need to try and make things perfect. But if working on this house from the late 1800s has taught me anything, it's that perfection is not always going to be achievable, especially especially when working on something older. That's not to say that you couldn't spend a bunch of time or money trying to get close to perfect, but I have found that is not always worth the effort. That felt like the case to me with this kitchen floor. So I decided to forge ahead and just try to make it look the best I can.
This is where working with these really large pieces is really annoying because it's really hard to maneuver them. Get the joints lined up perfectly. If I want to put enough force to try to hammer them in place, then it just breaks these little tongue pieces off. So it's really fighting me, but I'm determined to get it. I can't.
Let it go.
I can't let it go.
Just let it slide on out.
You gave me this sickness.
Just let it slide on out. If you look over this way, you don't see.
Yeah, as long as you don't look directly at it, which you will. I always tell Philip it's in the most visible area of the kitchen. And he says, everywhere is the most visible area according to you.
It's going to be so pretty. They're going to be looking up at the ceiling. Not at the
Now this section of the floor required me to do some notching to fit around door trim. Now typically most people will run the planks under the door trim by notching out the trim with something like a multi-tool. This gives you a really clean look. However, I decided not to do that for this floor because I knew that most of that trim in this kitchen was covered in lead paint, so I didn't want to take any chances cutting into it. I just ran it close to the trim, still leaving a bit of gap for expansion, and I will cover up all of my gaps with quarter round trim a little later.
Cleaned it up a little before we put it in. Oh, I guess the trim piece will hold it down.
It's on you. It's on you.
Jeez.
Let's do that again.
With the last piece of flooring finally installed, we had to take care of our door transition. I just picked up one of these transition strips from the local hardware store and cut it to size using some aviation snips. Once it was cut to the proper size, I just nailed it down with the provided nails. As I mentioned before, I'll also come back and add more trim around my edges as well as where the flooring runs under the door. Once that trim is in place and caulked and painted, this floor will be looking even more polished. I've been on quite the journey with this kitchen floor. Do you guys remember where this floor started? We had some really heavily trafficked hardwood floors in here that didn't match the rest of the hardwood floors in the house, so we decided to pull them up board by board. Doing that revealed just how much this floor was sloping toward the middle of the room, almost 2 inches. We got the floor jack backed up, replaced some rotten subfloor, and now finally we have a new floor in this kitchen that will hopefully be able to withstand the wear and tear for years to come.
All right, guys, I'm calling that a wrap on this flooring. Another major project done for this kitchen space, and I'm really happy to have that step behind me now. Now, I won't say this is the best floor I've ever put down because we were dealing with some of these dips and unevenness. There were just a couple areas that the joints, they just would not go together the best. I really fought them for a long time. I did put down some floor patch in that really low spot, and that helped a little bit, but to be honest, I probably needed like 6 or 7 layers of that stuff in order to get it up to the height that I needed. So that wasn't really the best product to use. I could have used that self-leveler compound and just poured a bunch of that, but I got in my head a little bit because I know we have some sagging issues here. I know when they came and jacked that floor up, we didn't put any sort of footer, anything really permanent to keep it from sagging more in the future. And if we just add a bunch of weight to the flooring, I was a little bit concerned that that would just cause it to sink even more. I don't know how much weight it actually would be, so it might not have been an issue. It's something that maybe I could have tried, I'm not sure. But I just kind of tried to make the floor work the way it was, and it looks okay. I definitely think it is good enough. I'm just saying it is not my best work when it comes to these LVP floors. The flatter, the more level the floor that you're gonna have is really the best for these types of floorings because they are a floating floor system. But it is definitely an improvement on the flooring situation that was in here before, so we are totally going to call that a win. All right, that's gonna wrap up this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you wanna see what we tackle next in this kitchen remodel, then make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss it. All right, I'll see you guys then. Bye.